All right. So welcome everybody. I think I know a lot of you through Melt. You're either in a Melt training or you're a Melt client of mine. Some of you may have seen this invite on Facebook. I am Carrie Bodendorf and I am a Melt Master trainer. And I teach Melt and train Melt all over the country. Well, I used to be all over the country until the lockdown, mostly teaching on Zoom. I'm actually the director of education for the Melt Method, and I help out with all the online trainings. And I'm here today with my very good friend, Danielle Delaquila. And just very briefly about me and Danielle. I mean, we've been friends for over 18 years. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I had really horrible digestive issues and couldn't leave the house. I mean, I was like so distraught with it. And because of Danielle's guidance and knowledge, I was able to completely reverse. I think what I had was ulcerative colitis. It was never really formally diagnosed, but through diet and all natural supplements, I was able to completely put myself in remission, and I've been in remission for over a year. So I put all of my trust in Danielle, which is why I wanted to promote this for her. She's a miracle worker. So not only my gut issues, but also helped me lower my cholesterol. It was 366, which was ridiculously high. I know, it's like, how could I have cholesterol that high? But I was all about the bacon, the butter, and the cheese. And through, again, all natural supplements and dietary changes, we lowered that to 222 in about, geez, I think it was like 2 or 3 months. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Danielle Delaquila. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, thank you, Carrie, for hosting this, and thank you to all of Carrie's people who joined us today. I recognize another couple of names that I've known for a while, so thank you so much for joining. So yeah, as Carrie said, let me just tell you a little bit about myself first, because I think that'll be an important thing to start with. So I am a functional nutritionist. I have a master's degree in nutrition. My business is called Eagle Vision Nutrition. I have, like I said, the master's in nutrition. My undergrad is exercise science. I'm a certified nutrition specialist by the American Nutrition Association. So in nutrition and dietetics, you could go one of each route. You could become an RD or you could become a CNS. And those are the two sort of, at least nationally respected routes of going either clinical, you're a clinical nutritionist through the CNS or the RD. RDs generally work in hospitals, and CNS work with other folks as well. I'm licensed in the state of Massachusetts and in Maine. I studied functional medicine through Chris Kresser's ADAPT Functional Medicine Practitioner Program. I certified through, continuing education courses that I've taken, bio-individual nutrition. I've taught at local community colleges. I was a nutritionist at a large United Technology Corporation Wellness Center. I've worked for drdockers.com as his functional nutritionist. I worked for Chris Kresser's functional medicine clinic until it closed, unfortunately. And I currently work for Dr. Margaret Christensen's Carpathia Collaborative Clinic, which is out of Dallas, and I'm her remote nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. So like most people who develop a passion for something, it's because of something they've been through. So all my life, I had a pretty good gut, pretty hardy. I used to joke with some friends saying that I should be the person who helps donate their stools to people who are looking to get like what's a stool, what do they call it? Not an implant, but they basically take the fecal transplant. That's what it is. They basically take feces from one person and they'll encapsulate it. They dry it and encapsulate it to folks who are really struggling with their gut issues, and they'll give it to a person, and it totally works. It's expensive. It's not cheap to do, but I used to joke saying my gut is in such great shape, I could do this. Well, long story short, about 7 years ago at this time right now, I had a tooth infection. I had to go get medication. The infection was starting to affect my brain. I had to go to the emergency room in the middle of the night, went on antibiotics. And for those of you who know how antibiotics work, they unfortunately don't just kill the bad bacteria, they kill the good bacteria as well. So it didn't just end right there. The infection came back again. I eventually had to have the tooth removed. Then springtime kept proceeding, and I ended up getting bit by a tick on Cape Cod, and I had 3 rounds of antibiotics in a very short period of time. And the next thing I knew is I was starting to get this kind of chronic diarrhea, and I was like, what the heck is going on? I never get diarrhea. So as long as I took my probiotic, I was able to keep it at bay. My diet's always been really clean, so I wasn't worried about that. But as long as I took my probiotic, I'd keep it at bay. As soon as I would forget to take this probiotic, diarrhea would ensue. Fast forward 6 months, I brought my girls to Puerto Rico. I was such a wreck there. Everything I ate was going right through me. And I just knew, when I went home that I would have to go do this GAPS diet that I had studied for a little while to be able to, and that's essentially what we did with Carrie, is the GAPS diet ended up really helping calm down her digestive system. I equate it to like a fire extinguisher, where it's like things are on fire, and the GAPS diet really focuses on bone broth. It's a huge staple, many different components to it. It takes away a bunch of fibers that your body might have trouble digesting, but the bone broth extinguishes the fire, puts it out. So I came home, I started that GAPS diet, and this is before I started studying functional medicine. So I didn't have all the same tools that I have now, but I was able to resolve myself. Well, when I came home, I got an official diagnosis. I had C. diff, which is Clostridia difficile, which is something that can end up happening after being on 1 to several rounds of antibiotics. So, so the one thing I did end up learning as I studied functional medicine more, that getting rid of that, pathogen, if you have a pathogen, and the inflammation is just part of it. Because guess what happened? I wasn't running to the bathroom anymore, but then there were all these food intolerances that I had developed. I couldn't digest beans anymore. I had to stop eating wheat. If I ate wheat or salad, I couldn't eat salad greens for 2 years. And of course, as a nutritionist, lettuce was a huge part of my life. And so what I had learned after studying functional medicine is that that's just stage 1, and there's many more stages to go. So with healing your gut, it's a several stage process. So I'm sure you all know that there's this huge epidemic of gut issues these days. We've all, every once in a while, had some sort of stomach problem, whether it's something we've eaten that doesn't agree with us, or we caught a bug, or maybe we traveled. But chronic digestive issues are certainly on the rise these days, and they could be difficult to diagnose. I'm sure, like many of you might have gone to the doctor before and said, hey, help me try to figure this out. And, they might do a colonoscopy, or they might do an endoscopy. And if they don't see anything like visibly wrong, they might just tell you have IBS. So there's a couple of different kinds of bowel disorders. The structural bowel disorders, you can actually physically see something when you examine it. It looks abnormally and it functions abnormally. But if you have a functional bowel disorder, everything might look just fine and normal. And, when they're sticking that scope down your throat and looking at the top part of your GI, or the scope from the bottom half, everything looks fine, but for sure something's not quite right. It's not functioning properly. So the prevalence of functional bowel disorder affects 1 in 4 individuals, and it's actually a lot more common in women. And whether that's because women are reporting it and going to their doctor and talking about it, or that it just happens in women. We're not really clear on that, but the idea is that it's 2 to 3 times more common in women than men. And, the functional bowel disorder ends up being put as this label of IBS. And IBS has been a bit of a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning, okay, it's not Crohn's disease, it's not colitis, it's not these things that we can see, so it must be IBS. So you just kind of get almost like dismissed, and you're kind of told to have a good diet and exercise and, go on your merry way. There's not really any sort of any sort of real guidance from mainstream medicine. So people end up very frustrated and confused and not really know what to do. So, this one. So as you know, there's some real obvious symptoms of gut issues. And those would include things like diarrhea, constipation, the gas, the bloating, the vomiting, the nausea, GERD or reflux, difficulty swallowing. It could be an unintentional weight gain or a weight loss. You could have Crohn's or colitis, ulcers, gastritis. But then there's some tricky, not so obvious symptoms that people might not really associate to having gut issues, such as allergies or asthma. You end up going to some sort of lung specialist when you have allergies or asthma or things like asthma, not realizing that the root cause is actually from the gut. So brain fog is another one, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disorders. You get sent to an autoimmune specialist. Are they looking at your gut issues? Are they looking at your microbiome? Some of the things I test for are autoimmune triggered bacteria that are present in your gut, which when they're present, I do stool tests on people with rheumatoid arthritis, and we find out you've got Klebsiella pneumonia, or you've got one of the other autoimmune trigger bacteria. Again, our body is this interconnected web of systems. They do not function on their own. They are all very much interconnected, and realizing that is an important thing, or you might miss something. Mood disorders, anxiety, depression, recurrent bladder, vaginal yeast infections, joint, muscle pain, skin issues, and then even things like polycystic ovarian syndrome. So my approach with gut health is to resolve it from the root cause. And the difference between functional medicine and mainstream medicine is that, mainstream medicine tries to treat the symptoms, and it's usually in a toolbox of a prescription pad and medications. With functional medicine, we're going to help you feel better while we are trying to figure out what the root cause might be. So we'll use, not me, I don't use medications because I am not a prescribing practitioner, but I do work collaboratively with some folks who do prescribe in our practice with the clinic that I work in. But myself, I will use diet, lifestyle, and supplements to help alleviate symptoms while we're trying to figure out the root cause. And in functional medicine, there's a 5R approach to gut health that's been proven to be extremely helpful. So the first part of the 5 R's is remove. And when we talk about removing, we're talking, it's kind of twofold. We want to remove any possible food irritants. Like for me, with my gut issues, I had to remove wheat immediately, and I had to remove raw vegetables. Those were the two things that were just sending me. After my diarrhea was resolved, I was still, the 5 months pregnant when I'd eat something. And I have a daughter who's been traveling the world right now, and she caught a parasite in Guatemala, and she's messaging me and calling me saying, "Mom, I look like I'm 5 months pregnant." And I'm like, "Yes, you have to get home and we have to finish resolving this issue. There's more things to do. I think you killed the parasites, but now we got to heal your gut." So the other, removing certain foods. And, I get into talking about the difference between a food allergy and a food sensitivity and a food intolerance. And we try to figure out what it might be for you. All of those things and that type of testing can be done. It's not that The food sensitivity or allergy tests are not included in this, but they can also be purchased if you're interested. But yeah, so the allergy is obviously something that causes like an immediate response. It's going to be, you know, your throat swells up, or maybe you develop hives immediately. Where a food sensitivity involves the activation of the immune system when exposed to a certain food. So an example would be like eosinophilia. That's a big one, but it could lead to malabsorption and then nutrient deficiencies. And then a food intolerance it doesn't really involve the immune system, but rather an abnormal functional response to eating a particular food. Some of these things would be called like gluten intolerance would be one, like maybe you don't have celiac, but you'll have a gluten intolerance. Or maybe you might have a histamine intolerance. That's a diet I work with often with people whose histamine buckets are overflowing, and then they can no longer eat or tolerate foods that have histamines because their bucket is so full to begin with. Yeah, and then the actual gut dysbiosis is the other part. So not everyone's root cause to their gut problems has to do with an overgrowth of bacteria or pathogenic bacteria or yeast or fungal or parasites that are present. Sometimes it's just maybe you don't have enough good gut bacteria. So doing a comprehensive stool test allows us to see what's going on in the inside. I know in different countries, this is like a yearly part of their physical, where I remember a good friend of mine is from Germany. She said, oh, at your yearly physical, every year in Germany, you get a gut test, you get a stool test, and you get shown what's going on. So it's a really important thing. My daughter, who is just in Guatemala, she went to the lab. She was able to get and order it herself, $5 for a lab to tell her what was going on in her gut. And yeah, I wish it was as easy here as it is in other places. But anyway, figuring out the gut dysbiosis and rebalancing the microbiome is an important part of the remove situation. Replace is next. And this is the tricky part that, one of the parts that end up getting sort of left out. So once you have these sort of pathogens or dysbiosis going on, you don't end up with a healthy atmosphere in your gut. The environment ends up being, when these bugs are killed off, they release toxins, and toxins don't allow for the regeneration of the healthy enterocytes, which are like the cells that are on the intestinal lining. So these toxins don't nourish these cells the way they need to be nourished to be able to create new ones, because I think they're turned over like every 3 to 5 days. So having that flow of nutrients that are available to our gut to be able to create that healthy environment is super important. Sometimes we end up with malabsorption, which leads to nutrient deficiencies. So replacing the nutrient deficiencies is really important too. I've worked with people who end up needing to use for short term, maybe some hydrochloric acid to help with digestion in their gut for a little while. I know that was a huge help for me for years. For years, I had to use betaine hydrochloric acid because my own production was quite low after my gut issues, or maybe digestive enzymes, or maybe ox bile. So depending on the person, we're able to figure this out and try to support you as your body is healing. The next stage is re-inoculate, and that's an important part because the agents that we use to kill off the bad bacteria or the pathogens, if you have any, or just to rebalance, mostly kill just the bad bacteria. They do tend to protect the good gut bacteria, but it's always a good idea to re-inoculate and reestablish the good gut bacteria. So I like to use a combination of fermented foods, probiotics, and not only probiotics, right? Because once you establish the good gut bacteria back into the gut, you have to feed them in order for them to really set up shop to stay there for you. So prebiotics are the fibers that are found in certain foods that help feed the good gut bacteria so that they stick around for a long time. And I always like to talk about the good gut bacteria as being like our army. They're there to defend us. They're our first line of defense, so that they don't just help gut pathogens, but they help viral pathogens, and just our body is able to, to be able to kill things off as we're supposed to. Let's see. The next part of the 5R approach is the repair. So I'm sure you've all heard of leaky gut or intestinal permeability at one time or another. So this, leaky gut is essentially caused by a few things. It could be by foods that we eat. A standard American diet is certainly going to lead to leaky gut. There is a physician, he's from Naples, Italy. He works at Mass General Hospital. His name is Alessio Fasano. And I can remember over 10 years ago, starting to getting into gut health and listening to some podcasts that he was on. He discovered this compound called zonulin, which is in our intestinal lining. Okay. So zonulin is like a gatekeeper. Okay. We have, if you look at the diagram here, see those normal tight junctions right here in between the cells. And this would be an abnormal junction where there's space here. So if you look right here, here's the intestinal cells. Things are supposed to get digested and then absorbed, and then safely goes into the bloodstream. Okay. However, if you have what's called leaky gut, you have activation of this compound that Alessio Fasano discovered called zonulin. And these undigested food particles can get in between and then goes into your bloodstream. Not only that, once these gates open up, toxins can go in there and lead to, neurological issues, autoimmune issues. So I like to use the example of having Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmune hypothyroidism. I'm going to use gluten because it's an easy one to pick on. So if someone eats something like wheat, okay, you eat a bagel, and bagel has gluten in it. Gluten has become even more of a difficult thing for us to break down. Every single person in this is part of Alessio Fasano's research, every single person who eats gluten stimulates the activation of zonulin. So those gates open up for every single person, every single time they eat gluten. For some people, they might open and close right away, and maybe there's hardly any damage done. For some people, those gates can stay open. And when they stay open, there is more likely to be a problem because more undigested proteins and substances can get through into the bloodstream before they're properly digested, never mind the toxins. So that is another thing that we can test for is the amount of zonulin that is that's being released in your gut. That's one of the markers we could test for on the GI map. And I will often look at that for folks because, again, repairing the gut lining is going to be an important part of this. So that whole gluten thing, getting back to that, you eat gluten. It's a knotted up protein. It's a three-dimensional mess. It's got to go through the digestive system to be able to get broken down. And then, if you think about what proteins are made of, they're made up of those individual amino acids. Okay. So as it goes through the digestive system, it's a three-dimensional knotted up mess. Then it gets cut down to these shorter peptide chains. So the peptide chains at this point in the intestinal mucosa aren't completely broken down. Your body's only supposed to absorb those individual amino acids. So if you have these peptide chains and they're leaking out into the bloodstream, your body doesn't recognize them and it elicits a antibody response. So it creates antibodies and it starts attacking these peptides. And these peptides might look like peptides that line our thyroid gland. So now your body isn't able to differentiate between those peptides that were broken down from gluten and the lining of your thyroid gland, or maybe the lining of your knee joint because your knee has a lot of pain, or your shoulder, or maybe it's causing, type 1 diabetes. So that's sort of the premise of autoimmunity. And repairing the gut lining is really important to be able to decrease the autoimmune response. And keep things inside. We want to keep things inside the intestine until they're fully digested and then absorb the nutrients. So yeah, repair is another big part of this. And the last part, which is a part that is often forgotten or often maybe not given enough credit, is rebalancing. And I know Carrie works a lot with this with MELT, right? I've sat in on many of Carrie's MELT classes and talking about rebalancing the nervous system, being able to promote parasympathetic activity rather than always being in that sympathetic fight or flight state. And, the doctor that I'm working with now, she specializes in mold toxicity, and she can't emphasize enough how much the rebalancing of the nervous system is vital to the healing process. So, not only the nervous system, but we also have to rebalance and make sure that, the nutrients and all the fiber to be able to feed the good gut bacteria, that we're, back in balance. Anytime we have some sort of gut issue, we're imbalanced, and this will help bring us back into balance. I'm going to finish up my slides and then I'm going to ask for questions. I figure it'd be nice once we start talking to be able to keep talking. So I've created this group gut healing package. I've been, doing it individually, but I thought that it would be a good opportunity to lead a group in doing so, to make it more affordable, to make it, more, I really like healing in community. I used to lead a lot of groups at the Wellness Center for the United Technology, and I did it a bunch in my work with Chris Kresser, and I miss leading groups. I think it works great. We've all got great ideas. I love to hear people's ideas. I like people to share their experiences together, because you're not alone in the struggles that you have, and I think it's a great thing to have this shared experience. So this package that I have developed is a 6-month program, and I have worked into the cost of the program a comprehensive stool test, my favorite one by GI Map. Oh, it's called GI Map by Diagnostic Solutions, and the normal cost of that is $459. This test looks at the good gut bacteria. It looks at a whole page of pathogens. It looks at autoimmune trigger bacteria. It looks at opportunistic bacteria, yeast and fungal markers, parasites, worms, protozoa, inflammatory markers in the gut, your digestive capacity. We could do an add-on of the zonulin. That's not a fixed, that's an additional, I think, $60. And then it also looks at your immune response, your gut immunity. So sometimes what I've seen is that if someone has a recent infection, their gut immunity goes up like crazy because their body's fighting something off. But then when I work with people who've had gut issues for years and years and years, and it's gone undetected, what ends up happening is their gut immunity goes way down because their body is really tired of fighting off whatever infection it might be. So there's things we can do to help improve gut immunity. It will also include a comprehensive blood analysis that I do through LabCorp. LabCorp is all over the country. It's everywhere. There's offices everywhere. I've never had a really hard time trying to find an office for somebody. And this blood analysis looks at, I think it's like 42 or 45 markers. And if you've ever gone to your doctor and asked for blood work, you're lucky if you get like 12 to 15 markers. The ones we did with Carrie was even more, because we did an advanced lipid profile, which is really interesting and cool to look at on people. But yeah, in this blood analysis, it gives us a full idea of what's going on with your thyroid gland. So most of the time, if you're worried about thyroid and you go to your doctor, they'll run one marker. It's called thyroid stimulating hormone. If it's normal in their range, you get sent on your merry way saying, nope, you're just cold, put a blanket on, go put a sweatshirt on, something like that. Where we look at TSH, we look at T3, free T3, T4, free T4, and then we look to see if there's an autoimmune response on your thyroid, which is TG antibodies and TPO antibodies. We look at your iron status, and I can't tell you how many people I have, either found out they have low iron, or some people have high iron, which is even more dangerous than having low iron. We look at inflammatory markers. We look at cholesterol, a bunch of different lipids. We look at your blood sugar. We metabolic. We look at kidney, liver. So it's a great test. I do it on myself once or twice every year, because it's great to have those numbers, and nothing's better than being able to prevent disease. So this program also includes 9 hours of group meetings. I have it outlined on the next page. It includes 1 hour with each per individual person. So I thought it might make the most sense, since everyone's tests are going to look very different, that I have one meeting with each of you, just one-on-one, so that I can go over your own individual tests and your own individual recommendations based off of those tests. Because no two tests are going to look the same, right? You're all individuals, and it's really important to be able to look at what's going on in your particular body and base recommendations off of what our tests are telling us about you in conjunction with your symptoms. I give all of my clients 10% off of their supplements. I use Fullscript.com, and if you haven't already signed up to Fullscript.com through me, there's a link in my website. Please feel free to do so. Whether you decide to work with me or not, you can use Fullscript to get your high quality professional grade supplements. I mean, there's millions of them in there. And if you ever need a recommendation, you could just ask me. And then I will also offer 10% off of any additional functional medicine tests that you might want to run. So if you wanted to run, food sensitivity, or maybe you think you might have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, I can give you 10% off on those tests as well. So here is the schedule. Can I move this up? Yeah, a little bit maybe. The program is going to run from May 23rd to November 14th. That's a 6-month time period. I right now have it scheduled for Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern time, although I do have one person who's from Belgium who might be interested in. So I was thinking, oh goodness, that makes it like midnight for her. So, but I'm thinking 6 p.m. unless she's fully committed, and then I'm going to have to think about changing it to possibly earlier. So the first meeting that we all meet will be a 2-hour-long meeting. And then I have them spread out mostly every 2 weeks in the beginning of this, with the tests getting done somewhere around week 3 or 4, and then allowing a couple of weeks for the tests to come in. And then weeks 5 through 7, I would be meeting with you all individually to go over your tests and your results. And then basically meeting for 1 hour twice in July, and then once a month for the remainder. So the idea is that there's going to be more support and more direction needed up front. And in the beginning, you're going to have more questions. I'm going to have more information to share with you. And then as time goes on, we start lifting off the training wheels a little bit, because you're healing and you don't need as much time and support. So that's how I have developed this schedule. And then I just want to finish off with 3 different quotes that I found from Hippocrates. We all hear about that all disease begins in the gut. That one's such a good and well-known one. And then I found a couple of more that I don't know, I just liked these. Natural forces within us are the true healers of disease. You know, we have such the ability within ourselves to heal our own bodies. And, you know, it's sort of my honor to help people realize their healing ability within themselves and to help sort of pull it out, along with the knowledge that I help share and the protocols that I help share. And then healing is a matter of time, but it's also sometimes a matter of opportunity. And so this could be your opportunity if you're looking for it. So if you'd like to take this opportunity, I am here to have you sign up. You can go right to my website, eaglevisionnutrition.com. You could hover over the services, and there is a button to be able to register for the group gut healing program if you're interested. But for now, I want to say thank you. And here's my contact information if you need it. I'm going to be following up with an email to you all who have come today. I will send you a recording of this in case you want to go back and listen to anything. And if anyone has any questions about anything, please send me an email. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. If you need to jump on a quick call because you didn't get your questions answered here, please let me know and I'll be happy to do that with you. So I am going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to open this up to questions because I want to hear from other people.
All right, so I had some questions come in to me as a direct message. So someone's asking, she has no bowel symptoms, but does this help sinus issues and cough? And the same person asked, is this different from Wellness Way program?
I'm not familiar with Wellness Way program, so I can't really speak to that. I'm happy to check it out, but it's not anything I've heard of, so it would be hard for me to speak to that. And yes, allergies and sinus issues definitely are a matter, a result of some sort of imbalance in the microbiome. Absolutely.
So if you want to raise your hand to talk, you can certainly use the reactions. You don't have to type your questions into the chat. You can just unmute yourself and ask Danielle. Oh, Liz said she sent you a direct message, Danielle.
Okay, cool. Liz Bergeron, are you able to work? Go ahead, Liz, do you want to speak?
Well, I worked with you briefly with Chris Kresser. Yeah, so I'm now at a point where I really need some help with because I have paralysis and it affects the autonomic nervous system, which affects all the motility. So really it's a motility issue. And so I've tried so many things and I'm just really desperate for, you just sound very comprehensive. So I'm just wondering if you could help jump on board and maybe speak to that directly. I know that it doesn't pertain to a lot of people. So
yeah, motility in general, is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, it's a big, but then that I have SIBO and gut pathogens and everything else because of the peristalsis and gut motility.
Yeah, yeah. Are you on any motility drugs right now?
I just started erythromycin.
You did. Okay, cool. I've heard good things about that as far as motility goes. Has it been helpful yet, or is it too early?
Just a few days, so it takes a while to build up. And I've tried Motilla Pro, but the ginger's too strong in that.
Iberogast.
And I've tried pharmaceutical Motegrity, and that just gave me a massive headache. So I didn't do that.
What about, have you worked with a chiropractor at all? I know like a lot of chiropractors that I've worked with do some manual work or even like some e-stim to be able to help stimulate things.
Okay.
those are definitely things to look into. I remember you, Liz. I remember details. So I didn't see you on here at first. So thank you for saying something.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like there's food agents. I mean, I'm sure you've tried the obvious things like the magnesium citrate and I mean, how about magnesium oxide? Have you worked with that?
No, I haven't.
Oxygenated, what the heck is it called? It's a particular
Calm?
supplement. No, it's not calm. It's not calm. Ozone. Is it called ozone? Magnesium, ozonated magnesium, I think it's called.
Oxygenated.
Oxygenated. Thank you. Yes, yes,
There's a brand called Poop Doc.
yes. I think I
Okay.
recommended that through Cresser with you. Yep.
Okay, yes.
Yep. That's a good one. And
That's
then
true, it is.
And then food things that I have found to be really helpful is soaking chia seeds overnight
Okay.
and consuming them in the morning. Or eat them at night before you go to bed, soak them during the day, eat them at night so that in the morning it can help. What it does is it draws the toxins in and causes like weight to the bowels. So it's that weight that sometimes we need to be able to feel to go to the bathroom. So that's been a huge secret of mine. Like I tend to be regular when I'm home, but I like to travel a lot. And when I travel, backed up. Yeah, it's like you're not in your own house, you're moving around. So I travel now with magnesium citrate and the chia seeds, and they both work synergistically well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll try those. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz.
So I see Shelly has a question, but first I think Patty typed me a question and then we'll get to you, Shelly.
Great.
So Patty asks, are you, sorry, I just lost it. Where is it? Are you familiar with the book Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will, I'm going to butcher his last name, Bulsiewicz?
I'm not. Do you want to speak about it or tell us your experience with it? Who was it? Carrie?
Yeah, here I am.
Oh.
Yeah, I just got his name and the name of the book by a doctor who used to be a radiologist, but she doesn't work as a radiologist anymore. She's kind of become a nutritionist, but not highly certified. And she was just talking about this book. I mean, and as a medical doctor, she was, I mean, in the Western United States, she was also looking into other avenues because basically she said, you know, doctors don't know anything about nutrition. Mm-hmm. So she was acknowledging that, and then also really talked about this book, and it's about very much plant-based, trying to go plant-based and the fiber way. And so anyway, I just wondered if that was something you had heard about, and I'm looking at it right now, reading about it.
Cool. I will speak just based off of what you just said. I could speak to that a little bit if you want. I'm a recovering vegetarian. I was vegetarian for 14 years, raised these two vegetarian. One of my biggest regrets in my life, ask Carrie. They were both extremely delayed in menses, didn't get their period till 17 and 16. And then she stopped bleeding for 2 years and started bleeding again once we got her on some serious like meat and protein. They were both like very much circus artists. So they were both always extremely lean, low body fat, very active, think gymnast, right? Yeah, they weren't getting enough protein. They weren't getting enough zinc. They weren't getting enough iron. They weren't getting enough B12. And so they weren't able to menstruate properly. She's finally normal now. She stopped bleeding for like 6 months at a time, every here and there. So now everyone's diets are balanced. They're bleeding normally. But anyway, Patty, what helped me realize that I needed to start being an omnivore again. And when I say omnivore, I do believe that not all animal products are created equally. I'm not interested in eating conventionally raised meat. I eat grass-fed, pasture-raised. I really want to know where the meat comes from. It's got to be high quality. I do consume dairy, but I don't buy anything that's not grass-fed and organically raised. So I understand why people think meat and dairy are inflammatory. It's not all. It's conventionally raised meat and dairy. You know, you cannot compare it. All the studies that are done that, you know, promote vegetarianism because of less inflammation, no one yet has ever done a study on well-raised animals. It's just not done yet. So there is a big difference. And in my opinion, you know, when we eat animals, we also have to eat, you know, nose to tail. You know, there's not one bone I throw away in my house. It all goes into a pot and it all makes broth. You know, I'll sometimes, if I don't have enough to make, I throw them in the freezer, I save it, and I make, you know, a pot of broth once a week. Because it is all of the connective tissue in between the bones, all that cartilage, that amino acid complex, we can't find it anywhere else. So if we don't get it from there, then we don't get it. And that's the real key to, you know, helping intestinal permeability and leaky gut. So yeah, I am all for eating vegetables when tolerated, and certain types of vegetables are, you know, if any of you who are suffering from gut issues might already know, like, it could be really hard to digest some vegetables. But one thing that is mostly easy to digest is bone broth and little pieces of protein. And for some people, your diet's got to go all the way back to that before, you know, to be able to, before adding in other foods. Carrie?
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hope that helps.
I think Shelley, you're up next.
Yeah, I think some of my questions were answered in that last statement. But would it seem like that the people who have those general gut issues would have SIBO? I mean, or does it really require a test? I don't know how expensive the test is, but it seems like I did a program with a guy, Jason from Seattle. He's a naturopath. And you basically just filled out a Word you know, information. It was only like 2 pages. And if you check so many boxes, he felt it was as similar as having the breath test to figure out if you had SIBO or not. Is there a simpler way to do it or a less expensive way to do the SIBO test?
So there is no other way to do a SIBO test except for a breath test. You know, there's some people who come to me and they have a stool test and they say, hey, my practitioner said I had SIBO. And I said, well, where's your SIBO test results? They said, oh, they said just they could tell from my stool test. And it's not true. There's one marker on the GI map that has methanobacteria, which means it's methane producing bacteria. But there's 3 gases we measure with SIBO. We measure hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. So that's just one part, right? Like when you have methanobacteria, it doesn't mean that they're in the small intestines. It means it's somewhere in your intestines and it's showing up in your stool, but it doesn't mean, there's no way to tell where the bacteria is from a stool test, whether it's in the small intestine or large. So,
or from a questionnaire with symptoms. Wouldn't you have certain symptoms that would meet criteria?
I'll tell you, through doing this the past 6 years, I will sometimes think someone has SIBO and they don't always. So, I mean, there's a saying I learned in my training is test, don't guess. The SIBO test isn't that expensive. I think it's around $250. So it's not as expensive as a stool test.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Joyce is next.
Hi, Joyce. I've met
Hello.
you.
It's good to
How
see
are you? Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, this is very intriguing. And I remember when Carrie was going through at least one of her rounds of really simplifying her diet, doing a lot of bone broth. That was a number of years ago. So I don't know if it's the time that you were talking about, but I really need group support to do something like this. I couldn't believe Carrie was doing this by herself because I don't feel like I have the discipline. And also I'm not the cook in my home. My husband is, and he cooks for me. Like I eat vegetables for breakfast, cooked vegetables and an egg.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to take on some of this myself. So something's going to have to give here, but I'm wondering what I can, how I can take advantage of the group support. Will we have a Facebook group? Will we be able to maybe have an accountability partner to connect with in between times or something like that? Because I think I'm going to really need that. I can't imagine going, a whole week without having somebody to check in with. I think I'm going to need something daily.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to be there to support via email for sure. And yes, I do plan on having a Facebook group so that we can all communicate together, because your questions or concerns might be someone else's too. So we can share that in community. So yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, but yeah, I do plan on having a Facebook group.
Okay.
To share recipes, to share resources, to share, everything.
And the other thing was, in terms of food sensitivities, at what point do you recommend that somebody get a food sensitivity test versus doing an elimination diet? Like, are there some cases where you think, yeah, it's just going to be more efficient to do the testing and then you'll just know, and then you don't have to deprive yourself of so many foods?
It's a great question, Joyce. So this is how I usually recommend. I mean, unless someone's insistent on the food sensitivity test up front, I usually tell them, don't waste your money right away, because when your gut is out of whack, you could test every single day for a week and different things could show up every single day, depending on what's going on. So it's usually my recommendation to resolve the actual gut issues that we know about first, rebalance everything, fix the leaky gut, replace the nutrients, replace all of the digestive factors, work on stress. And then if you find yourself still having issues with different types of foods, then we might consider it once you're back in balance. But I don't usually recommend it ahead of time. Yeah, I have this one guy I had the last week, and he lit up like a Christmas tree on this food sensitivity test. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what are you gonna eat? He's eating like chicken, rice, potatoes, I think cauliflower, so everything white, and you could chase your tail. Like, I want to say, let's run this again. Is it still the same? How valid is it? I don't know the answer, because we have to fix his gut first.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I try to be really practical in my approach, because I mean, you could go to some functional medicine practitioners and your first appointment, you're out the door, it's $600 for the visit, and then you've got $1,500 of tests to do right off the bat. So I do try to make it affordable and reasonable, and take things one day at a time, and try to work from the bottom up rather than the top down. Yeah.
All right, great. My main issue is dermatitis on my scalp. My bowels seem good, but I also have brain fog in the morning. And I just know that, like, I can feel sometimes when I'm exercising that my energy just doesn't come. It's like I'm moving, or I just took a walk outside and it's beautiful, and I come back and I'm tired.
Yep.
So, yeah. So that's my thing. So
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, brain fog is a huge one. For some people, it could be, the whole intestinal permeability thing and the leaking, of sort of anything out of the gut causing issues. The blood-brain barrier, you know, when things go across the blood-brain barrier, it can affect our cognition. I'm just noticing there was a question for, yes, how much the program is. I didn't put that on there too. It's on my website. It's $14.97, including the 2 tests, the 1 hour of your individual appointment, and the 9 hours of the group gut healing meetings together, and then the support in between.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left, Danielle, and I've got 2 people with their hands raised and 2 questions that I want to read you in the chat first. Laurel, you're going to be up next, so figure out how to unmute yourself. So Jane is asking, should we be off supplements before the LabCorp tests are done?
That's a good question. I would definitely go over which ones you might want to go off of before the test. It's a great question. And usually if it's something that you like, I wouldn't recommend going off your vitamin D supplement. Like that's going to be one of the things
it's going to be individual, right?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, it might be individual. For the most part, if it's supplements you've been taking for a long time, I usually recommend keep going with it. There are certain supplements that the gut test will tell you to come off of, because we'll get a baseline for that, which is good. Like if you're taking digestive enzymes, I'll tell you to stop taking those. Or if you're taking probiotics, I might tell you to stop taking those. But generally speaking, for the blood tests, I don't usually have people come off their supplements.
And then really quickly, before we get to Laurel, can you repeat how to consume the chia seeds and how much would you recommend?
Yeah, good question. So I'll usually soak maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons raw and put them, you know, maybe in like a half a cup of water, and I'll leave them in the fridge to soak. And then when I eat them daily, you know, and you could store more than that. They're not going to go bad in your fridge. I usually store them in a little glass ball jar. I'll usually take like 2 tablespoons a day after they've been inflated. So not 2 tablespoons raw, but 2 tablespoons as they are absorbed with water.
Thank you. Laurel, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Danielle. We worked together way back on
Way
the
back,
clean eating
yeah.
program.
Yeah.
And I've been dealing with this super weird thing for about 7 months, and it's burning mouth syndrome. I don't know if you ever heard of it before, but it can have a lot of different, you know, causes, or it can be standalone.
Mhm.
And it's been 7 months. I've been to a gastroenterologist. I've had every test that gastroenterologists like to do to you.
Yep.
I've had negative autoimmune tests, negative allergy tests. I've had a food sensitivity test, but it didn't really open you know, like why this happened. And right now, so just like a lot of forensic investigation on my own, I've been on an elimination diet for 5 months just of my own, you know, like, okay, this tends to make my symptoms worse. So, you know, so I'm kind of like the person you were talking about. I'm eating chicken, I'm eating potatoes, I'm eating corn tortillas, green apples, carrots, and watered down frozen jello is my treat. It's
Wow.
been
Wow.
super frustrating. So I think it was a perfect storm of things that caused it, from stress and being in a period of time, you know, high level of stress, and being in a period of time where I wasn't working out, and I wasn't like, ever since your clean eating thing, I don't necessarily eat poorly, but I love sugar. And so I'm, you know, having more sugar than I should on a daily basis. Obviously not for 7 months now, but you know, so I'm wondering how I fit into this program, because I've done the elimination.
Mhm.
I mean, I've done an elimination of my own accord, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm wondering, you know, I'm just, you know, now, you know, like I've actually been 2 weeks without symptoms until yesterday.
Mm.
I don't know what I did different, except for the fact that I have a lot of personal and work responsibilities that kind of have me keyed up. And so, you know, I feel like this too shall pass, you know, give myself a week or 2. But 2 weeks is the longest time I've been without symptoms. So I'm super disappointed that they kind of came back on Sunday.
Mhm.
You know, but I just don't know where to go from here.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so that's why your email caught my eye.
oh, well, thanks, Laurel. So I mean, that in and of itself could have to do with the mouth microbiome, right? We've got the skin microbiome, we got the gut microbiome, we got the mouth microbiome. You know, I mean, I could totally like have a consult with you, Laurel, and try to, you know, investigate what might have brought this on in the first place, and try to, you know, go that way. Whether it's coming from your gut or not, I wouldn't know unless, you know, we had like, you know, if we got down to your history, right? Like I would be asking you a lot of questions to try to figure out where this might have come from.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's so exactly what you're feeling is what, it's pain? Is it actual burning in your mouth?
It's actually like if I had drank hot coffee or hot soup. It's
Mm,
literally like a burning and my gums are sloughing off. Now I had, you know, like in its worst form, it actually felt like my throat was going to close
wow.
when it was at its peak of terribleness. But, you know, the long-term result was more like super dry mouth.
Yeah.
And kind of that's where I'm back to today. It's just been, and it's just been crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's things I can offer to help you. And, you know, like some of the things that come up for me, like, is it silent reflux that's coming up all the way into your mouth? Like silent reflux, there's reflux and people usually feel that in their esophagus,
Right.
that burning, that chest burning pain. And
Mhm.
silent reflux goes up into the vocal cords. And I'm wondering, like, is it even going
Right.
further and coming up to your mouth? So, you know,
I
maybe it's coming from like a SIBO infection. Maybe it's coming from an H. pylori infection. You
mhm.
know, maybe you've got some sort of yeast infection going on in your mouth.
Mhm.
Maybe you have like vitamin A deficiency and have what's it called? Sjorgen's syndrome.
Yeah, I have been tested for that and that was negative.
Okay.
And
Okay.
all of my gastro tests, you know, because I had silent reflux years ago,
Yeah.
but all of my recent gastro tests don't show any evidence of me having that because that is one of the symptoms of why you would get it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you know, I don't know. I think that ultimately it was, you know, a bad case of, you know, being, you know, gut being out of whack, and that's what caused it. And I finally got it to a point for the last 2 weeks where it's manageable, but I don't know how to baby step back from it. And then now today it's kind of a different story.
Uh, Well, Laurel, if you don't decide to do this and you want to like work with me just one-on-one, please reach out to me and let me know, because I do feel like I could help you. And whether it's just, you know, from the gut, I'm not sure yet. Like that's something I'd have to work on you with. But
Mhm.
yeah, we should chat regardless.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting.
It's
And
a bizarre,
yep.
it's very, very rare.
Yeah,
It's
it sounds
super
like it.
rare.
Yep.
And
Yep.
most doctors have looked at me like I have 3 heads.
Oh, I'm
But I'm
sorry.
now a professional on the subject, so.
Thank you for sharing that, Laurel. And last but not least, we've got Nancy. So Nancy, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi,
Hi,
can you
Nancy.
hear me? Hi, I'm
Yeah.
here with Logan, so if I sound a little strange, he's just over 1 year old.
Oh.
I'm wondering if your practice is associated with any health insurance providers.
It is not, Nancy. It's not. No,
Okay.
being, you know, working with people all over the country, you know, if nutritionists need to be licensed in the state in which insurance is covered. And so, you know, I'm licensed in Maine and Massachusetts because I've lived in both states. But yeah, unfortunately, It's not. But I will also tell you, Nancy, that if you did, look at a cutie pie. If you did the comprehensive blood test that I did with your doctor, it would cost over $2,000. And so I'm able to get it for people for $349, which is an insane deal.
Okay, yeah, that was my second question. If we did do the testing through our doctor, is that something that health providers cover? Or,
Well, I'll tell you one of two things. They'll never run all the markers because I've done it with hundreds of people by now. Some people are like, oh, I'll just bring it to my doctor and they'll do it. They come back, I'm asking for 50 markers. They come back with 15. Like it just doesn't happen. They don't do it. They're so quick to give a prescription, but for some reason they don't want to do laboratory tests. They're not that expensive. They're not that expensive. I ran them on my sister-in-law's daughter several years ago, and there was a scare where we were trying to use their insurance for, I don't know, it was like maybe the deductible or something like that. Anyway, long story short, she got a scare from her insurance company, and instead of it costing the $349 like it would through me, the insurance company was telling her they owed $1,200.
oh my gosh.
I was like, no, you're paying me. This is not, your insurance has nothing to do with this. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's crazy.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I pretty much kind of thought it might be outside of all of that, but I thought I would ask to be sure.
Yeah. What I do for people is if people want to use their HSA card, you can pay me with your HSA card. That's something you can do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Anyone have any other questions?
All right, I think we are done. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. So remember, I love you all to pieces. Do not send me your questions.
Yeah.
I will
Send them to
send
me.
you Danielle's email and you can email Danielle.
Yep. Send your questions to me. If you have any hesitation or more clarification, don't hesitate to reach out. If you're interested and want to sign up, the link is on my website. Please just let me know if I can help you. And I'm excited. I hope some of you or most of you end up doing this program with me and allow me to help you.
Yeah, all of you will get an email with the recording and all of Danielle's information.
Yep. Great.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie. Bye.
Bye.
I'm listening.